Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with me, Sarah, where I just talk about movies and shows that I enjoy. Today I'm going to be talking about Enola Holmes. This movie actually came out in 2020, but the third movie is coming out in a couple of weeks, and I'm excited, July 1st, and I'm excited about it. Enola Holmes to me was like a nice little surprise. I just decided to watch it because I am a fan of I'm a fan of Henry Cavill, and he was in and Sam Claflin. Love Sam Claflin, and they were in the same movie, the first movie together, and I was like, gotta watch it. And I actually really enjoyed the story. I just loved it so much. So I'll be talking about that today. And then I'll talk about the second one too. I'm going to watch the second one probably tonight. And hopefully by this week, I'll have the second video out too. But anyway, so today I'm going to talk about Enola Holmes. This movie came out in 2020. And the AI overview, according to, I think this is, what website is this? This is Bing. So it says Enola Holmes follows Sherlock Holmes's spirited teenage sister as she sets out to find her missing mother, using her wits to outmaneuver her famous brother and uncover a dangerous conspiracy. Blending mystery, period adventure, and playful fourth wall breaks, it delivers a charming, fast-paced, and empowering tale. Critics praise Millie Bobby Brown's engaging performance and the film's lively style, making it a fun family friend watch. A fun family friendly watch. So the director was Harry Bradbeer, and it actually is based on the Enola Holmes mysteries, which I think is there's some books, I believe, young adult books, and then the movie stars Millie Bobby Brown, Henry Cavill, Sam Claflin, Helena Bonham Carter, and Louis Partridge. So let me just get into this. I have lots and lots of notes on this movie, but such a fun movie to watch. Anyway, so we're introduced, the movie opens and we're introduced to Enola. She is breaking the fourth wall. She's talking to the audience, looking directly into the camera, talking to the audience. She says that Enola is alone, spelled backwards. Her mother has always told her that she would be great on her own, but they always spend time together. She also mentioned her mother is a fan of word games, and this will be important for the movie. This will be important later, so remember that Enola's mother loves word games. Father died when she was really young, so she doesn't know her father. And then her brothers, Sherlock and Mycroft, yes, the Sherlock Holmes, they took off kind of shortly after. And so she doesn't really know them either. And so it was just her and her mother, which she loved. She says her mother is not traditional, and then they show a montage of all the things they would do in the house, kind of playing tennis in the house. Her mother's teaching her all kinds of things. So her mother definitely is not traditional. Her mother has always told her that she can do anything and be anyone that she wants. And this is an important theme throughout the movie as well, which I will touch on that throughout this video. So Enola tells us that on her 16th birthday, her mother went missing. She left the night before, and they don't know where she's at, but her mother left her gifts with the housemaid. So Enola goes to the train station and she picks up her brothers. And so she's picking up her brother. She rides her bike, what she's learning. I think she just learned to ride a bike. But she goes to the train station. She gets to the platform, and her brothers, Sherlock and Mycroft, who are Sherlock is played by Henry Cavill, and Mycroft Holmes is also played by Sam Claflin. So those are her brothers. So they're coming off the platform and they're walking, and she's standing there waiting for them. Like she kind of has a smile on her face, and they just walk right past her. So you know how I mentioned it before that they or she doesn't really know her brothers. They haven't seen her in so long either. So they don't even recognize who she is. When they walk past her, she calls out, she turns around and looks at them while they're walking, and she says, "Mr. Holmes, Mr. Holmes." And they're like, "Yeah." And she says, "You sent for me." And they kind of just stare at her. And then Sherlock says, "Enola," pleasantly. And then Mycroft is like, my gosh, just disgusted. And this also shows a distinct difference in the brother's personality, which I will touch on throughout the movie. But Mycroft basically thinks that Enola looks a mess. He's like, where are your gloves? Where is your hat? And she's like, yeah, I don't wear those things. So they all go back to the house, the carriage, in a carriage. Mycroft is stunned how the house looks because there's a bunch of vines and greenery all around the house, all over the house, growing out of the house. So when they once they get into the house, Sherlock immediately goes into detective mode because mother's missing. So he looks at the flowers, chrysanthemums, which that'll be important for later. Um, Mycroft stumbles across a book about feminism, and Mycroft hates that. Feminism is also a very important theme throughout this movie. But of course, you see the book, and you know that um, the mother, Eudora is her name. Helena Bonham Carter plays the mother. She is a feminist. And you can kind of see that in the beginning of the movie when I mentioned the montage earlier, how she is not your traditional woman. You can tell she is different. And so she's a feminist. And also, side note, aside from Henry Cavill being fine, his voice is so pretty. I didn't realize like how like his voice is so nice and soothing. And so I was rewatching this movie again, and I was just like, wow, does he do any audible books or any type of voiceovers or games? Like it's just so nice. I just love his voice, a nice little timbre to it. But anyway, um so Sherlock, like I said, is looking around the house in detective mode, and he says that it wasn't foul play. She planned on leaving. Sherlock asks if Enola has a tutor, and Enola says that no, their mother taught her. She read every book in the library, including Shakespeare, Locke, the Encyclopedia, Thackeray, and Essays of Mary Wollstonecraft. She says that her mother told, or their mother told her that is the best way for her to become a woman. Mycroft says if that's what she wants you to be. And Sherlock kind of calls him out, basically like, fall back, calm down. So I do want to touch on the literature that Enola just mentioned. So one of the things she says was Shakespeare, Locke, Thackeray, and Essays of Mary Wollstonecraft. So we all know Shakespeare, but according to Wikipedia, John Locke, one of the most influential Enlightenment thinkers, and is also considered the father of liberalism. Thackeray is or was a satirist and a parodist known for his fondness of roguish characters and his attack on British high society. And Mary Wollstonecraft is known for her book of Vindication of the Rights of Women. So she's also a known feminist. She thought women were only inferior to men because of their lack of education. At that time, women weren't able to be educated like men. So that's the reason, that's one of the things that she thought. So I looked up all this. This was all according to Wikipedia. So as you can see, what I just mentioned, the theme of what Enola was reading, or what Eudora let Enola read, she is trying to educate her and make her know her rights. And so again, that is an important theme, or that will be important as we go throughout this video. Enola overhears Sherlock and Mycroft speaking. Mycroft wants to put Enola in a boarding school, which obviously for someone like Enola, that's very restricting and stifling. She is not going to like that. She does not like routine like that. She wasn't raised on that, so she is not going to like a boarding school. Sherlock tells Mycroft that she may want to actually stay home. And Mycroft insists that she needs a firm hand. Again, showing the distinct differences between Mycroft and Sherlock. So Mycroft is not trying to show any mercy. He's like, I don't care if she needs to go to a boarding school so she can get wiped up. Sherlock's kind of like, nah, she doesn't want to go to a boarding school because he knows how she is, because we'll find out that these two are very similar. But he's like, no, she may want to stay home. And Mycroft is like, don't care. She's my ward. She's going to boarding school. I guess Mycroft called the headmistress of the boarding school, so her name is Miss Harrison. So I guess he called her to come out to their house because I think the plan is Enola, or she's supposed to see Enola. She obviously, they have a meeting and she doesn't like it. So much so, she runs away to Sherlock and Mycroft while they're in, I guess, the salon, the living room. And she begs them, she's on her knees begging them not to make her go to boarding school. And of course, Mycroft shows no mercy. Sherlock says he can't help her because she is Mycroft's ward. So after that, Enola runs out and she goes to she's in the street outside of their house, and Sherlock finds her and she is drawing a caricature of Mycroft. So Sherlock and Enola end up having a conversation. They're going down memory lane, and Enola tells Sherlock that she kept every clipping of him in the newspaper because, again, he is Sherlock Holmes. And so Enola tells him that she saved every clipping in the newspaper of him, and he says that's very flattering. And Enola checks him and says, "And it took for our mother to go missing for you to come home." Whoop, checkmate. Enola concludes that their mother is not coming back, and Sherlock agrees with her because their mother has planned to leave and is not coming back. Sherlock says those are always the greatest mysteries. This upsets Enola, and she says she doesn't want to unpack the mystery. She wants her mother back and she wants things to go back so the way they were. And Sherlock tells her, "You're being emotional," which is understandable but unnecessary. He tells her to look for what's there, not what she wants to be there. And I mention this moment because to me, when he says that, that sounds like something that their mother would say. So I just wanted to point that out. And then it also kind of shows a connection. This conversation and everything shows a connection between Sherlock and Enola. You can tell he actually cares about Enola, and they're discussing their mother, why Mycroft has not given Enola the time of day, and Enola is the ward to Mycroft, so and he does not care. So back to Sherlock telling Enola to look for what's there, not what you want to be there. She starts to look at all the gifts that her mother has in fact left for her 16th birthday. She finds like a little strip of paper that says alone at the beginning, which she thinks that might be a clue for her. So she gets like tile letters, like, like like kind of from a Scrabble board, like letters like that. And gets she puts all the letters together that are on, the scroll, like the little strip of paper. And so she's trying to decipher, she's trying to decode what that word's saying. When she decodes the message, it says, "Look in my chrysanthemums." And remember how Sherlock, he came into the house and mentioned chrysanthemums. So she goes to that plant that Sherlock had looked at, the chrysanthemums, but she doesn't find anything. But then she looks to the side and she sees that or remembers a painting that her mother did of chrysanthemums. So she goes to that painting, and when she looks on the back of that painting, there is um, money behind that painting, and then there's another little watercolor painting on it that says the future is up to us. At this point, she has a flashback of her mother saying, "There are two paths you can take: yours or the one others choose for you." So with that, Enola sets off to find her mother. So this is the path that she is choosing to take to find their mother, whereas the path that Mycroft, maybe Sherlock, wanted her to take is go to boarding school and get wiped up. But Enola's choosing her own path, so she's setting off to find her mother. She disguises herself as a boy because she puts all the clothes that Sherlock grew up in. She wears those. She goes on a train because she's going to London, and she overhears a family looking for their son. She also sees a creepy man on the train. And when she looks at the creepy man, the older man seems to be looking at her and nods his head towards her. And just remember this little tidbit for later because I'm not sure he was actually looking at Enola. Wink, wink. So she goes into a carriage on the train, which is like a car on the train, and she looks up and she sees a bag that's moving, like a luggage bag that's moving. And it turns out there is a boy in the bag. They exchange somewhat of niceties, and he introduces himself as Tuke, or as Viscount Tewksbury, the Marquis of Basilweather. She tells him to get out. The boy tells her that he has just pulled off a daring escape, and Enola cuts him off and says, "You have not. In fact, there is a man following you, and I need you to get out because I don't want him to think that I have anything to do with you because I fear that if he thinks that, then I am now in danger. So I need you to go." And so he leaves, and he comes out. He comes back 30 seconds later, and he says that the guy is looking for him, and he is checking every single car, and he begs her, Tewksbury, he begs her to help him. And she's like, "No, thank you." And she leaves. So as she leaves, the creepy guy on the train that she saw earlier, he's wearing a bowler hat. The creepy guy finds Tewksbury, and she can hear him yelling in the background. She ends up going back to the car, and she finds that the man with the bowler hat actually is has Tewksbury, and he has him dangling outside of the car of the train. So there is like this cave coming up, like the stone cave. So he's probably going to hit that that cave, I guess. Which is wild. But Enola saves the day and hits the guy with the bowler hat, and then hit her and Tewksbury run off. And this is where the adventure with these two start. They end up jumping off the train together and stranding the guy with the bowler hat because the moment they jump off, it's just a massive cliff or it's just water. So obviously, the guy in the bowler hat can't jump off the train, and so they end up escaping. So we cut back to Mycroft and Sherlock at the house, and we see Sherlock and the housemaid have a conversation. The housemaid is worried for Enola and says that she has a very kind heart, but she's never really been out in the real world, and asks Sherlock not to abandon her again. And with that, Sherlock puts on pause a little bit to stop looking for their mother and now is looking for Enola. That's his priority. We cut back to Tewksbury and Enola. Tewksbury asks who Enola is. She tells him who she is, and he figures out that she's related to Sherlock Holmes, and she says yes, but do not tell anyone. I am undercover. I'm in disguise. She also tells him that he should be telling her thank you, and he says, "For what?" And Enola breaks the fourth wall and says, and looks at the camera, like in shock, because clearly Enola just saved his life, and he's like, "What did you do? Why should I thank you?" So wild stuff. So after some time of walking around, Enola and Tewksbury need to find camp for the night. And they don't know what they're going to eat, or Enola doesn't know what they're going to eat. And Tewksbury's like, "No, we can eat all of this. Like, look around." And it seems like Tewksbury has a green thumb. He knows a lot of these plants. And he's like, "We can eat this. This plant tastes delicious. This mushroom's great." And he tells Enola, "If you can start a fire, we can have a feast." So I liked this moment because this kind of shows a role reversal a little bit. You have he's asking Enola to start the fire, which traditionally maybe the man would start the fire. And Tewksbury knows all about the plants, knows everything about the plants. Enola does not, which typically women or girls know about these things. So I liked this moment because I thought it shows a lot of the role reversals, which again I will touch on throughout the movie, but I liked that moment. So while they're eating, they discuss why each other has run away. And Nola says she does not want to go to finishing school. Tewksbury tells her that he had a near death experience and he was about to take the seat in the House of Lords. And he has all these ideas to progress the estate, but his family wants him to go join the army like his uncle. And he was scared that he would hate every second of it for the rest of his life. And this is a moment where Enola and Tewksbury connect because Tewksbury was kind of embarrassed to tell Enola that, and Enola's like, "You shouldn't be embarrassed," because she understands it. Tewksbury asks where Enola is going in London, and he tells her that they should stick together. Enola swiftly says, "No, we need to go our separate ways," and Tewksbury acquiesces. And in fact, they do go their separate ways when they get to London. So while she's in the streets of London walking around, there is a lot of mention of a reform bill that is taking place. And you hear people meeting up and talking about it, and people who are opposed of the reform bill. So this will be important flair. This is an important theme of this movie as well. The reform bill is happening. So far we have the feminism, and then we have the reform bill. So those are two important things for this movie. So we cut back to Mycroft and Sherlock is reading a newspaper, and the front headline says, Lords face crucial vote. Remember, important for later, so remember that as well. Mycroft tells Sherlock that no one can find Enola. He says it doesn't help that people are looking for the Marquess as well. The Marquess, who is the Viscount Tewksbury. There are flyers all around looking for Tewksbury. Mycroft asks Sherlock if he's been looking for the Viscount Tewksbury, which he has not been. Sherlock said he turned down the job. He said he's occupied fighting their sister, and Mycroft is like, no, 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 you are supposed to be finding our mother. And Sherlock's like, relax, I'm looking for both of them. Mycroft says you never cared about her before, and Sherlock cuts him off and says she's 16. Mycroft tells Sherlock not to worry. He has the best police officers looking for Enola, which is wild because this is Sherlock Holmes, who I think it doesn't get any better than him at that time, I'm assuming. But anyway, while Mycroft is talking to Sherlock, Sherlock sees a story in the paper that has a headline that says two boys jump or leap from the train. And he smiles at this because he has a feeling that that's probably Enola. Back with Enola, she's off to blend in with society. She's trying on all these Victorian dresses, and then she finds lodging. She goes back to her plan to find her mother. She's leaving ciphers, which are cryptic messages in the newspaper in case her mother is reading them. So she's leaving all of these messages in all of these publications. Um, ciphers, which are like messages to decode, because again, like I said, her mother likes word games. So that is how they're communicating throughout the movie to one another. So Enola leaves ciphers in several publications in the hopes that her mother is going to read one of them. In the message, she basically says, "Thank you for the chrysanthemums." And remember, the chrysanthemums was the message that her mother left for her first that she had to decode, and then she asks her mother to send her another message. She then goes to an address that she has seen her mother write to many times before when her mother was at home, and it's a tea room. But in fact, it's not just a tea room. Above the tea room is where a bunch of women are learning jujitsu. She goes upstairs and talks to the coach of the jiu-jitsu and says she's looking for Eudora Holmes, and the teacher realizes it's Enola. Apparently, she taught Enola how to fight when she was a little girl. That she was her first teacher. They go off and speak. Enola tells her the story of how she got here and that she's looking for her mother. And the coach, tells her, "What makes you think that your mother wants to be found?" She tells her that Eudora has been running her entire life, and if she wants to stay hidden, she will. She also mentions to Enola that Eudora has work to do, but she does not tell her what work Eudora has to be done. Or, excuse me, she does not tell Enola what work Eudora has to do. She tells Enola that she has to get back to her students, but she also tells Enola that you're in London. If you want to be in London, be tough. Live life, but don't do it because you're looking for someone. Do it because you're looking for yourself. So we have flashbacks of Enola trying to decode some things that her mother has said in the past. The name Ellie Houseman comes up quite a lot. So she decodes this and comes up with Limehouse Lane. Apparently, this may have been a place where her mother and other women met. When she gets there, you see flyers of the women's right to vote, also the women's suffrage movement. And then another flyer says protest, unrest, and civil disobedience. There's a lot of gunpowder lying around in this facility, Limehouse Lane. And then also there are instructions on how to make explosive, which concerns Enola. And she's trying to figure out what her mother is planning. While Enola is walking away from Limehouse Lane, the guy in the bowler hat um, comes around, which I guess he's probably I guess stalking her, but he attacks her and then she ends up getting away, which I'm not really going to go into that scene because it's a fight scene, but it's a good scene. She goes back to her lodging and she decides that Tewksbury is vulnerable and is not able to defend himself. However, she says she has the strength to defend him. So she is now going to put finding her mother to the side and is now going to try to find and save Tewksbury. Because, again, remember the guy in the bowler hat is trying to off Tewksbury. So he is still looking for her. The guy, excuse me, the bowler hat is still looking for Tewksbury and trying to off him, delete him. So Enola is trying to save Tewksbury now. So Enola goes to Lord Tewksbury estate. She disguises herself as a widow and she chooses a widow because she says no one ever really questions a widow. The Tewksbury family sees her and they want her to get out. She pulls out all the stops and says that she is Sherlock Holmes' assistant, which obviously that carries some weight. This piques interest in Tewksbury's mother. However, this man comes and says it's poppycock. She does not know Sherlock Holmes. And they argue about who knows Sherlock better, but Tewksbury family ends up throwing them out because they don't really want to hear this, and they're just like, "Get both of y'all get out." The name of the man who Enola is arguing with is named Estrad of Scotland Yard, I believe. Estrad ends up leaving, and Enola asks one of the house staff of um, the Tewksbury estate where Tewksbury spent most of his time, and he tells her that he spent most of his time in the woods. So we cut back to London, where Sherlock is at the tea room where Enola went, where she met the jiu-jitsu coach. Sherlock is now there. We also find out her name is Miss Grayston, and she asks how Sherlock found her. He says he saw the letters in the house, and there were also some other clues, and I'm not going to get into, but he too saw the letters in the house. So Enola figured that out too. Sherlock tells her that their mother needs to be home because Enola needs her. Sherlock asks about Enola, and Miss Grayson says that she was fine. She was just with some useless boy. Sherlock then asks Miss Grayson what mischief she and his mother are up to, and this upsets Miss Grayson. And she gives him the business, okay? She tells him that he doesn't want to understand any of this because he doesn't know what it means to be without power. Sherlock says he's not interested in politics. Miss Grayson checks him and says, "No, it's because you have no interest in changing a world that suits you." Okay, girl. Yes. Yes. Period. She essentially calls him a loner and an ostrich with his head buried in the sand. However, she says with his occupation, you see the world so closely, but you can't even see how the world is changing. She tells him that the Reformation Bill is just the beginning. And Sherlock says, if it passes, which at this point she kind of looks at him in disbelief and then walks off and is like, listen, I have cakes to bake, I got things to do. But she does tell him that Enola does need him. Then we cut to Mycroft getting a shave. It shows him sitting next to Estrad of Scotland Yard. So this was the guy that was at the Tewksbury estate that was arguing with Enola. And apparently Mycroft has hired him to find Enola. We cut back to Tewksbury estate. Enola is in the woods. She walks past a tree branch She walks past the tree branch that Tewksbury said that he had the near death experience with, which that tree branch he said was going to crush him or should have crushed him. Enola looks at it and suspects something. She looks at the tree trunk like it's been cut or so. But anyway, she then discovers a treehouse. She's in the treehouse, and there are all these clues that possibly show what Tewksbury wanted to do in his plan. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, there are a bunch of clues in the treehouse, so I'm not really sure. But however, Enola does say something. However, Enola does mention how clever Tewksbury actually is and doesn't give him enough credit. Also, this is probably why Bowler Hat guy has been following him because he's privy to this information. So that's pretty important. How would Bowler Hat know all of that? This guy seems to be a stranger. How would Bowler Hat know what Tewksbury is doing? Hmm. Wink, wink. So while she's thinking of all this and discovering all of these things, the Dowager Tewksbury, who is the grandmother, interrupts her and tells her that those branches are not stable. The grandmother told Enola that they discovered his plan a few days ago, and then Enola and the grandmother are walking around the estate. The grandmother tells Enola that it's always been a privilege that the family was given a path of England to protect. She says, as the world becomes more unstable, it's important that these ideas stay preserved for the safety and security and the future of their country. The grandmother asks Enola if she is a new thinker. The grandmother says her son was a new thinker. He never thought about what was, but was always looking at what could be. And she suspects that Lord Tewksbury, her grandson, is the same way. She says England's true glory is what is. The grandmother tells Enola to leave and have a nice day because if Tewksbury's mother and uncle sees her, that they'll be upset and have Enola arrested. And with that, Enola goes back to London and looks for Tewksbury. She finds him and he's working at a little flower shop, which he seems so happy. But he asked her why she's come back, and he thinks it's because she's there to find the reward. And Enola says, no, I've grown to miss your absence. So Enola admits that she misses or missed him. She does emphasize, though, that he is in danger, and they bicker for a bit, and it's really cute. They're adorable. I think they're just so precious. And I do want to mention he tells Enola that she looks better in pants than in a dress. And I really like that because, that's how Enola kind of is. She's not really this fancy girl. She is this tomboyish, rugged lady. And I like that he pointed out that he actually likes her that way versus her like putting on the facade of a fancy high society lady. He then tells her that he missed her too, and they start walking together. Also, there are flyers of a missing girl, which seems to be Enola. Looks like a picture of Enola, but Tewksbury and Enola don't see that. They go back to Enola's lodging, and Tewksbury basically is like, "This place is trash." And Enola said that the lady that she bought the dress from said that this is like one of the best, and he's like, she lied to you. And this moment is important to me because this kind of goes back to what the housemaid was telling Sherlock, that she is very sheltered, or she is somewhat sheltered. So Enola knows all these things. Her mother has somewhat prepared her to go out into the world, maybe, but there are still things that she doesn't know because she's kind of just been at her house with her mother all these times. So this is the first time she's actually out in the real world. So I just thought that was an interesting moment. The lodging, Tewksbury basically being like, the lady lied to you. This place is horrible. But Enola thought it was okay because she doesn't know any better. So I thought that was interesting. So Tewksbury sees all of the newspapers that Enola has, and Enola tells him about, the messages, the ciphers that her and her mother used to communicate with one another throughout the newspapers. And then Tewksbury tells her that it seems like nobody wants them. And Enola agrees. And that's kind of another bonding moment. That was kind of a sad moment. I thought that was kind of like, oh, nobody wants them. But they do have each other. So that's sweet. So anyway, I thought it was a little cute, a little bittersweet. Tewksbury asks Enola if he really is in danger, and she says absolutely. She mentions that his family has not sent anyone, no detective out for him, but they've sent a murderer, bowler hat. Tewksbury is trying to figure out why they want him murdered. She says, oh, I don't know, your land, your estate, your seat, the same reason why your father's dead. And Tewksbury's like, no, 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 no. My father was not killed. And she's like, yeah, I know he was. And then Enola tells Tewksbury about the branch that almost crushed him. So remember, I said that she kind of looked at the branch. She said, it didn't just crush you, it was cut. And then they're interrupted by Estrade. Estrade thought he was being slick and he was in her room the whole entire time, but Enola saw him in the corner of her eye, so then she attacks him. And we're assuming that he knew that Enola was there because I had mentioned the flyers, and he took one of the flyers, and I guess um, went around looking for her, and the lady who told her about the lodging ratted her out, and that's how he found out that she was there. So Tewksbury and her get a dresser, and they put it up against the door of Enola's room, and she tells Tewksbury to leave out the window because there's a safe way for him to get out, but he doesn't want to leave her. And she tells Tewksbury that he's in more danger than she is. Basically, he'll get off if he's found, and all she'll just have a life that she doesn't want to live, i.e., going back to the boarding school. And she tells him to go again. And Tewksbury says he does not want to leave her, and then she yells at him to leave. And then he looks at her one last time and he leaves. So Enola, needless to say, is caught, and we cut to a scene with her and Mycroft going to the finishing school or the boarding school with Miss Harrison. And this scene is very intense. So it's just Mycroft and Enola in the carriage. Mycroft tells her he knows that she does not like him, but he just wants her to be happy. And Enola, who's upset, says, you don't want me to be happy. You want you to be happy. And basically, she says, you don't want me to mess up your reputation. And he says, you've already done enough damage, along with our errant brother, which that's a dig to Sherlock. So I don't know. I guess he might have some resentment towards Sherlock, which I think they do kind of touch on that kind of in the beginning. He mentions that Sherlock kind of left them, and I think Mycroft had to deal with a lot of this stuff. So I think there is some resentment there. But anyway, Enola tells Mycroft to let her out of the carriage, and she will deny to anyone that they are in any way related with pleasure. And then Mycroft, after she said that, goes off, and he screams at her and tells her that she is his ward and she will do as she is told. And this just makes Enola just bust out into tears. And I mean, I said the scene was intense, and it's pretty intense. And then he just switches and goes back to normal and asks her to give the money back that she found in her mother's portrait, because technically it's his money. And he asks for the money back, and she gives it to him, and he says, good girl. And then they just ride off in silence. And I just want to say that that was some good acting between Sam Claflin and Millie Bobby Brown. Like, that was a loved that scene. I thought it was just great acting, and you can really see the tense and the disdain that they have for one another. So I just thought that scene was just great acting. Love it. And so we see a montage of Enola struggling in finishing school or boarding school. This girl, this ain't it. This ain't for her. She hates it. She does not fit in. It's just not her thing. And then we see Sherlock visits Enola at the school. Sherlock tells Enola that he basically visited all of the places that Enola had visited in London, and you can tell that he's pleased by that because basically Enola beat him to it. Enola asks him if he found any of the explosives, and he says he did. Enola asks, well, why would she have those? And Sherlock says he shudders to think. He says perhaps she wants to change the world. And Enola says perhaps it's a world that needs changing. She asks if he helped Mycroft catch her. And he says no. But Enola says, you found out about the money. And Sherlock says, yeah, you ran away. We had to see how far you were going to go. And then excuse me, Enola tells Sherlock that she's just another case to him. She's just another curiosity. And Sherlock kind of hurt. It's like, no, I care about you. And Enola is shocked. And she mentions it's a little callback to what he said to her earlier. When he says that he cares for her, she says, you're being emotional. It's understandable, but it's unnecessary. And of course, Sherlock had like a little chuckle because that's what he told her a few scenes ago. And I do want to mention too, Sherlock is kind of a loner. Sherlock Holmes, I guess. I'm not too familiar with Sherlock Holmes because I don't think I've ever watched anything with Sherlock Holmes, but I guess he's kind of a loner. So he doesn't really show emotions like that because he's probably always dealing with facts. So being a detective, so him being emotional is not really a thing, but you can tell he actually really does care about Enola. Sherlock mentions the Tewkesbury case to Enola, and he tells Enola that he figured out that they have been together. He also asks her if she solved the case, and she says no. And then Sherlock gives her advice and says, from one detective to another, sometimes you have to take your feet in the water and attract the sharks. He then tells her that he came by to give her her childhood toy that they mentioned at the beginning of the movie. I'm not really going to get into that, but it's a little bit of a sentimental moment. But he found her childhood toy underneath her mother or their mother's pillow. And he says that it's sentimental and but mother always found Enola extraordinary and he does too. He then tells her that the choice is always yours. Whatever society claims, it can control you, as Mother has proven. And then he leaves. So Sherlock had a newspaper when he came to visit Enola, and he told her to keep it. And later that night, we see Enola reading it. So one of the headlines says it's something similar to this because autocorrect done got me, and I don't know what it says, and I can't go back and to look at the movie. But one of the headlines of that newspaper says "Deadlock with Lords as vote looms." And on another page, it says, Hope fades for the young lord. And Enola is putting two and two together. So then she's interrupted by a knock at the door and is told that she has a delivery. The delivery is from Mycroft and it's very heavy. And we see the package moving and it is Tewkesbury in the package. And this is kind of a callback to how they first met. So remember when they first met, Tewkesbury was in this bag, like on the train, and now he's there to save Enola, and he is in this little wicker basket in this little package. I thought that was cute. Tewkesbury says he figured out a way he can help her escape, and they can both fit in the package because it's a little wicker basket, like I mentioned. And she says it's a great idea. However, the minute she gets in that wicker basket, she's like, "Nope, nope, nope, help me out." She's like Miss Harrison. She'll figure it out. So now she's trying to come up with a different plan. So now we cut to the new plan and we see Tewkesbury carrying the package. Miss Harrison is questioning him because he's not supposed to be there because he's a boy. And he says that he has a package from her, or excuse me, has a package for her. She's trying to open it, but he insists that she cannot open it and she has to open it in private. And that was from the instructions of his employer, who is Mycroft Holmes. And You can tell that Miss Harrison is pleasantly shocked. And then she asks two other girls to take the package to her office. We cut to her office, and Miss Harrison is getting excited to open the package. And then she opens the package, and there is just a sheet of paper in the package. And the package is probably a caricature that Enola drew of Mycroft kissing Miss Harrison's hand because they have like a little crush going on. I don't know why. Ugh. But anywho, and then Miss Harrison sees that and then sees Enola and Tewksbury in her little motorized car. And then she just screams. So Enola was able to get out of boarding school and run away. So Enola's driving, and then they come to a fork in the road, her and Tewksbury. She has a flashback of her mother telling her about something and decides I can't really remember what it was, but she decides that she and Tewksbury need to go to Basil Weather. And of course, Tewksbury is like, Enola, why? And she says, because an injustice has occurred and we need to right some wrongs. So she shows him the paper that says the headline of the deadlock in Lords as vote looms. She asked him, was he supposed to be, or when was he supposed to be inducted to be a Lord? And he says, imminently. And she asked how he would have voted for the reform bill. He said the same as his father would have before. She asks him who would have known that and who stands to own the estate if his father passed away and if he died. He says his uncle. And then he asks Enola if he thinks his uncle is behind all of this. And Enola says it would make sense. So then they arrive at Tewksbury Estate, and Tewksbury asks, why are they doing this? She tells him, like other ladies, she didn't learn embroidery. Her mother told her how to fight, and she will find the answers for him. Basically, she's trying to find the answers as to she's trying to find the answers as to why they are trying to off Tewksbury. Then she tells him to trust her. They go into the mansion, which is, Tewksbury's home, and it's extremely eerie. It's very dark. Yeah, it just is creepy. And Tewksbury asks, where is everyone? And Enola says, they know that they're there. Then all of a sudden, gunshots are being fired. And it's the man in the freaking bowler hat firing the shots. It's like every time you keep thinking that you're getting rid of this man, he pops up somewhere. Anyway, Enola and Bowler Hat get into it, and Bowler Hat knocks Enola unconscious. Tewksbury attempts to attack Bowler Hat, but then he knocks Tewksbury to the ground and he tries to choke Tewksbury to death. Enola regains consciousness and then has a flashback of her mother telling her that she is not alone. And then she gets the strength to get up. Enola gets the strength to get up and save Tewksbury. She fights Bowler Hat, and Bowler Hat end up hitting his head. And she like grabs him and she's like, "Who do you work for? Who do you work for?" And he says, "For England." That's a attempt of my British accent, guys. And then he dies. Then they hear clicking, and it is the clicking of the Dowager, Tewksbury's grandmother. So it's the clicking of her cane. And she's walking down the hall. And she picks up the revolver that the bowler hat guy had. And she tells them that Tewksbury's mother and his uncle are looking for him. And she says that they never understood and tells Tewksbury she's so sorry, but the country's future is at stake. And then she shoots Tewksbury, and Tewksbury hits the ground. And Enola, devastated, she runs to the grandmother and takes the revolver. I'm not gonna lie, this was kind of a weird moment. I don't know why she ran straight to the grandmother. And I think the grandmother was also trying to shoot Enola as she was running towards her. However, she was out of bullets at that point. So I don't know. But anyway, Enola gingerly takes the revolver out of the grandmother's hand, but then she immediately runs to Tewksbury and she's crying and embracing him and trying to get like pick up his lifeless body and hug him, and she's just crying over him. And then she puts her hand in his hand, and this is Tewksbury's hand, this is Enola's hand. She puts her hand in his hand, and she's clasping onto his hand, and then all of a sudden, you see Tewksbury's fingers just interlock with Enola's. So Tewksbury is not dead. He closes his fingers around Enola and then he wakes up. He then tells her that he's not a total idiot. And it seems that he is wearing one of the metal plates. So there's like these knights in shining armor, like not literal knights, but like, like the fake knights with just the armor there. I don't know, whatever. I think I don't know what I'm talking about. So he puts on like a metal armor plate. He put one underneath his jacket when they were there. So the bullet didn't hit him. So yay. And then Tewksbury tells his grandmother that her time is over. And so I don't know what ends up happening to the grandmother, but she's out of here. So the next scene, we see Sherlock walking into an office, and he's there to see Estrade. I guess it's Estrade's office. And Sherlock tells Estrade to arrest Tewksbury's grandmother because she tried to kill him. She tried to kill Tewksbury, and she killed his father. And Estrade asks Sherlock how he came up with all of this. And Sherlock says it was divided loyalty. With the son dead, Tewksbury's dad's Tewksbury's uncle would take the seat of the Lord and vote against the reform bill. And that is what the Dowager wanted. And he thinks that the father and Tewksbury would not want that. So basically, they would be against the reform bill. Estrade asks, how come the uncle didn't do it? Sherlock says, because of all the medals of honor that he wore on his uniform. And Sherlock said that he was not in the country when Tewksbury's father was killed. He was serving in a war. He then says the truth is always there. You just need to look for it. And then Sherlock walks off confidently. But then Estrade says, I have another question. How did your sister find out all of this before you? And Sherlock looks at him and says, I'm sorry. And then you see Sherlock walking off, and he says, ha, while he's walking, because he's just pleasantly surprised that Enola figured all of this out before he did, because she's so smart. Or like her mother said, she is extraordinary. We then cut to everyone back in London. Enola's walking alone, and she comes across Tewksbury, his mother, and his uncle. It looked like he's about to go into the meeting because, he's a lord now, and he's officially a lord now. And he sees Enola and he asks if she is safe. And I also want to say with this moment too, there is a like a gate separating them. So, I think that might be a little bit of a metaphor too, because, Tewksbury is kind of in this world and Enola's in this world. So it's kind of like, showing their differences, or like how they're from two different parts of society. But anyway, um, Tewksbury asks if she's okay, and if she's safe and hopefully not staying in that trash lodging that she was staying in. And she says, no, it's much better now because she's using the money that his mother gave her for the reward for, finding Tewksbury. And Tewksbury says she was reluctant to take that money. Um, Tewksbury also says that, mother says that there's always room for you at our estate. And Enola says, your mother clearly has not spent time with me. And Tewksbury, in a roundabout way, says, well, what if I want you to stay? And she says she has to refuse. And then he looks very sad. She caresses his hand in a way to comfort him. And it was a little awkward because I don't think Enola is used to people missing her or showing that they want to be, or want her if that makes sense. Aside from her mother, obviously, but she's always with her mother. So I don't think she's used to people wanting to spend time with her or saying that they want to spend time with her, because, her brothers kind of seem like she's a nuisance and she doesn't really talk to anybody else. So anyway, I think she's a little shocked that Tewksbury had said that or was sad that he wouldn't be around her anymore. So um, he asks when they will see each other again, and she says, you can't get rid of me," jokingly. He then takes her hand and kisses it. And with that, Enola walks away, and Tewksbury watches her walk away, and he sheds a couple of tears, and it's so sweet. And then he walks back with his uncle and his mother. Enola grabs a paper and she sees a message from her mother, and it says, "To meet me at Royal Academy 5 tonight, mother." However, she realizes this is actually not from her mother and she thinks it's probably from Sherlock. We then cut to Mycroft and Sherlock at the Royal Academy, and we don't see anything. And Mycroft tells Sherlock that, "I think sister has beat you again." And Sherlock says he knows that Enola knows that it's him, but he knows that she would be too intrigued not to come. So he figured that she would be there. Sherlock says if they do see Enola again, he wants her to be his ward. Whew. Sorry, that was hard to say, guys. And Mycroft is like, "Sure, I washed my hands of her. You can have her." We did find that the reform bill went through thanks to Tewksbury. Um, Sherlock tells Mycroft that he thinks Tewksbury is interesting and that he is very keen on Enola. And Mycroft says, "Great, maybe he'll marry her and then they can both tame one another." And then they go off to have a drink. And while they're walking to have a drink, Sherlock sees the sentimental toy that he brought to Enola at the boarding school or the finishing school that their mother had up under her pillow. He sees that little toy lying on a pillar and he knows that Enola is there. And then he puts it back. Then they walk past Enola, who is disguised as like a newspaper boy, but her head's down so they can't see her. But Sherlock and Enola know that they were both there. And then she goes to her new lodging and she's told that she has a visitor, and she goes to her room and her mother is there. You can tell Enola is shocked, but she's also upset. And her mother apologizes and Enola cries. She tells Enola that she couldn't tell her where she was going or she would have put her in danger. Her mother tells her that the reason she left is not because she doesn't love her. It's because she does love her and she doesn't want her to grow up in a world that might be her future, and so she had to fight. Her mother says that you have to make some noise if you want to be heard. And Eudora then says she thought she would be the one to change the world, but it's in fact Enola. And she says, "Is it true what they said about the reform bill?" Enola confirms that yes. And what she means by that she helped Tewksbury and Tewksbury helped pass the reform bill. And Eudora says, "You are a remarkable young woman." And then they embrace. And then Eudora thanks Enola for all the messages or the ciphers that she's been putting in the paper. And she says, "If you ever need me, send me a message and she'll look out for them." Enola tells her mother that she must go, but mother says, "Let's just stay like this a little bit longer." And they just stay and embrace and hold one another, which was very sweet. So the last scene, which is obviously the concluding scene, she is breaking the fourth wall and she's talking directly to the camera and she's reintroducing herself. So we're basically kind of going full circle. When we started the movie, she is talking directly into the camera and she's introducing herself. And now we're ending the movie and she's talking directly into the camera to the audience and she's reintroducing herself. So she says, "To be a Holmes, you must find your own path. Her brothers have, and so has her mother. and she now must find her path. She says her name backwards, it's spelled alone, but realizes that mother never wanted her to be lonely. She just wanted her to find her freedom, her future, her purpose. She's a she's a detective. She's a decipherer, a finder of lost souls. Her life is her own, and the future is up to us. And then she sets off. She's riding her bicycle through the crazy streets of London, and that is how this movie ends. And I absolutely love this movie. I just thought it was the bee's knees. I just loved it. I love the message that it sends to young girls and young women and women all around, that our future is up to us. We have to depend on ourselves. We do not have to depend on a man, because throughout this movie too, I didn't really touch on it during the video, but you hear a lot of like useless men and things like that. So how, girls and women should depend on themselves. And also, I do like how at first you didn't think there was going to be, I thought Tewksbury and Enola were going to be platonic, but they kind of have like a little bit of a sweet relationship, which was really sweet. And also it kind of shows, how he really just appreciated Enola for Enola. That she was not like ordinary girl. She wasn't very feminine. She was kind of her own person. And he liked that just as much and was very supportive of her. So I think that's also a very cool message to put into a movie for younger girls and women. So I loved the movie, and I loved the themes of feminism and how women need to count on themselves and the future is up to them, and they have to choose their own path and don't let anyone choose for you. So I absolutely loved the message of this movie. So like I said, it was a nice pleasant surprise when I watched this the first time, and I was so tickled watching this again because I haven't watched this in a few years, probably since it came out, or probably since the second movie came out, which I think the second movie came out 4 years ago. So that was probably the last time I watched the first movie. So, anyway, my next video, I will be doing the second movie of Enola Holmes 2. So, I hope to have that out by this week, hopefully. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. Um, Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know your thoughts on Enola Holmes, what you loved about it. Did you love the feminism angle as well? Did you like the adventure? What did you like about the movie? Please let me know. Let us discuss. But anyway, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I will see you next time, and stay safe out there. Bye.